Salt spray hammered the canopy. The gray Atlantic below was a churned sheet of steel, broken by the thin white line of surf and the black dots of men trying not to die. In the hood of her A-10C, the shoreline strobed green and red, range numbers tumbling, target brackets refusing to give her the separation she needed. Her jet vibrated with the low animal growl of the GAU-8 spinning up on standby, a sound she felt in her teeth more than heard. First Lieutenant Alina Reyes's gloved thumb hovered over the master arm switch. She had the SEAL exfil marker dead ahead. Blue, friendly, too close to the incoming patrol trucks kicking sand across the beach. ROE said no. No fires inside that envelope. The trucks said they didn't care. Through the windscreen, she caught a flash of someone on the beach looking up, arm raised, a flare or maybe just a plea. Ember. We are exposed. The JTAC's voice cracked in her headset. If she hosed the trucks now, she might shred her own people. If she held fire, the trucks would overrun the divers before the boats could push off. Her forearm tensed, elbow locked, the jet sinking lower than any instructor would have tolerated. She exhaled once, slow, and 12 hours earlier. The wind coming off the North Sea smelled of salt and cold metal, even inside the ops building. Alina stood at the edge of the briefing room table, helmet bag at her boots, listening to the projector fan whine while a satellite image of a rugged slate-colored coastline flickered on the screen. The black-clad Navy officer at the front, Lieutenant CMDR Hannah Vo, tapped the shoreline with a capped pen. This is your exfil lane. We need it clean for approximately 6 minutes, Vo said. Her tone was even, not unfriendly, but it carried the finality of someone used to other people making space for her operators. Alina nodded once. Copy. Behind her, the detachment ops chief cleared his throat. She's our most junior stick, Commander. The words slid under Alina's skin. She kept her eyes on the image. If she turned, they'd see the reaction. Vo didn't glance back. Your senior pilot is on the second tanker window. We need a jet on the first slot. We were told she's available. Now she did look at Alina. You current on night cast, Lieutenant? Yes, ma'am. Then we're good. The ops chief subsided, but Alina felt the weight of his doubt remain in the room, like a hand on the back of her head. She inhaled slowly through her nose. Ask only what matters. Don't make them think you're over your head. What's the ROE around the extraction? She said. Keep it clean. Keep it relevant. Vo hit a key. A second slide appeared. Short, blunt text. No fires inside 150 meters of friendly strobes without JTAC clearance. You will have JTAC on the water. Call sign harbor. You are to minimize signature. No unnecessary ordnance expenditure. We don't want whoever owns those weapons to know we touched them. Alina let the rules settle. 150 meters wasn't generous on a dark, wet beach with vehicles moving, but it was workable if everyone hit their times. On Alina's left, Captain Jordan Vick, her flight lead, the one going to tanker, shifted in his seat. Intel said this transfer was low-vis, low-threat. Vo shook her head once. Intel was wrong. Last 2 nights, local patrols reacted to maritime traffic inside 5 minutes. Our divers will be in the water longer than that. So this was the real problem. Not the divers in the surf, not the cargo, but the people who would come looking. Alina felt the urge to ask how many vehicles, what calibers, whether they had thermals. But Vo's face had the closed look of compartmentalization. The Navy would not give more than they had to. Push, and you look needy. Don't push, and you fly half-blind. She chose the middle. Will Harbor be able to laze if we have to get kinetic? Only on exfil, Before that, they're blacked out. Understood. Ops Chief scribbled something on his pad. Weather's creeping in. Ceiling might force her lower. Then she goes lower, Vo said, as if it were obvious. We need the exfil lane. That was the moment Alina recognized the shape of the night. She was not the main effort. She was the person holding open the door while other people did the thing that mattered. But if she failed, their success didn't count. It was the kind of supporting role junior pilots were supposed to ease into. It was also the kind of role where a mistake could mark you for a year. Vic leaned toward her as the briefing broke up. You sure you don't want to swap? I can try to get on the first window. There was the out. Take it, and you confirm what the ops chief implied. Refuse it, and you own whatever happens over cold water tonight. I've got it, sir, Alina said. You can babysit the tanker. His mouth twitched. Your funeral, Ember. She gathered her helmet bag. Vo stepped close enough that only Alina could hear. Your JTAC is good. If he says he needs you close, believe him. We'll back you up if it's justified. That was more assurance than she expected from Navy. Still, it came with a hook. If it's justified. Outside, the wind hit her full in the face, hard and wet. The A-10s sat on the line like patient beasts, gray against gray. Her jet tonight would carry the GAU-8 and a pair of Mavericks. Enough to maul trucks, not enough to start a war. She paused on the steps, letting the cold bite her cheeks, and imagined the beach lit by muzzle flashes and IR strobes. 150 meters was a lot of space when everything stayed neat. It was nothing at all when men were running for boats. She squared her shoulders, headed for the squadron building, and started memorizing the exfil lane. The SEAL workspace was a borrowed room off the hangar, stripped down and smelling of neoprene and gun, oil. Folding tables held dry bags, dive computers, and black helmets marked only with tape and numbers. Men moved quietly, efficient, hardly sparing a glance for the Air Force pilot in a green flight suit standing in their current. Alina waited just inside the door until Lieutenant CMDR Vo waved her over. Beside Vo was a lean, weathered petty officer with a headset around his neck and the relaxed posture of someone who'd spent years on the water. This is Chief McCrae, Vo said. Your JTAC tonight, Harbor. McCrae sized her up in a second, eyes flicking to the name tape, then to the A-10 patch. Ma'am. Chief, Alina said. I wanted to make sure I know what I'm looking at. That's why she's here, Vo added. Then to McCrae. Give her what she needs, not what she wants. That was the line then. Alina pulled a small notebook from her sleeve pocket anyway. Okay. On exfil, how many heat sources am I expecting? 2 boats, 6 bodies minimum, maybe 8 if we have to drag anyone, McCrae said. His accent was coastless, clipped. Until we're back on the surface, you shouldn't see a thing but water. We're cold. No IR, no chem lights. So if I see bodies on the beach before your time on surface? Not ours, McCrae said immediately. You call it in. You do not shoot unless I tell you we're clear. We'll pop strobes when we're moving to the boats. That gives me, she glanced at the wall clock, maybe 30 seconds to differentiate if the patrols show early. That's more than we'll have on the sand? Vo folded her arms. You're overhead. You'll see them before we do. Not if they're hugging buildings inland, Alina said before she could stop herself. I've got sea clutter, low cloud, and I'm one ship. If the patrols run hot, I need to know what's definitely friendly. McCrae didn't bristle. He just nodded like it was a fair point. Friendly signature is 2 IR strobes in line on the lead boat, plus me on the radio. Everyone else out there is a problem. That's radio on maritime or air? Air. You'll have me on your net. She wrote it down. 2 strobes, line, lead boat, harbor on air. Everything else, threat or unknown. She wanted to ask the next obvious question. How many in the assault element? And did they have any indigenous support that might appear in her pod looking exactly like the threat? But Vaux's earlier warning, give her what she needs, not what she wants, hung there. Push it, and she'd get stonewalled. Alina shifted. What about your timeline in the water? Ops said it's long. McCrae made a low sound. Sea state's junk. We'll be slower than anyone likes. You'll see the patrols before you see us. There it was again. Patrols. Always said like they were inevitable. Like weather. Last 2 nights, McCrae went on. Locals spun up in 4 or 5 minutes when they heard engines they didn't recognize. If they're running IR scopes, they'll see our wakes coming off the beach. We'll need you to make the lane look unfriendly. Without firing inside 150, Alina said. Unless I tell you otherwise. She met his eyes. Chief, you know 150 at night, on a wet beach, with moving trucks and boats, is basically no room. Roger that, ma'am, he said, calm. But those are the numbers I was given. You keep the trucks off the sand, we get off the sand. You miss a truck, we fight on the sand. And that turns this from deniable interdiction into shootout on the evening news. Which was exactly why they wouldn't tell her more. The whole thing was balanced on political glass. Her gun camera would be the guest nobody wanted. She flipped to a blank page and drew the coastline from memory. Jagged, 1 inlet, 1 road. Tide? Dropping through your window, McCrae said, leaning over. Which means more beach to cross. Slower for us, faster for them. So, bigger kill zone, more time exposed. She began to annotate. Road entry here, probable patrol origin inland, boats exiting to seaward on this bearing. If she couldn't have people, she'd have geometry. Vaux watched her for a beat. You good, Lieutenant? I'm good, Alina said. It wasn't entirely true. The picture in her head still had holes shaped like men's bodies and boat spacing. But she had their lane, the tide, the strobe pattern, the JTAC voice. She could work from that. As she turned to go, McCrae called after her. Ma'am? She looked back. If I say I need you low and loud, I mean it. I won't ask casual. There was respect in it, but also a warning. He would ask. And when he did, it would be because the patrols were already on the beach, and the ROE would be the thing between them and the boats. Copy, Harbor, she said. If you call it, I'm there. Outside, the hangar doors were still open to the gray. The wind cut through her flight suit. She tucked the notebook away, mind already rerunning the rough map. Patrols in 4 to 5 minutes. Divers slower. 150 meters. She would have to make the sky do more than it was built for. The sky over the flight line had lost its color, sinking into that flat northern blue that promised rain. Sodium lights washed the A-10's skin the color of bone. Alina jogged across the tarmac, helmet under one arm, checklist pinned under her thumb, feeling the wind tug at the ends of her hair. The crew had already rolled the ladder down. The jet's position lights winked like an impatient signal. Her crew chief, Staff Sergeant Morales, met her at the nose. Weather cell's moving faster than forecast, he said, headset cords looped over his shoulder. Ops wants you off in 8. 8 minutes? Alina checked her watch. That was barely enough to strap in, power, and make the taxi time. Unless you want to take it in the dark with rain on the canopy, Morales said. They want you gone before that. She should have been in the cockpit 5 minutes ago, running the mission through in her head. Ingress altitudes, push times, Harbor's voice, the way the coastline would look on the pod at night. Instead, she'd been in the Seal Bay chasing details they wouldn't give. Now the clock was here, non-negotiable. "I need 2 to run a mental brief," she said. "You got 1," Morales countered, already moving to the ladder. "Jet's hot, ma'am. Don't make me tell Ops you were doing yoga in the seat." It wasn't disrespect exactly. It was the ground truth of a crew chief who'd seen pilots dither and miss slots. She swallowed the retort. He was right about the weather. The first cold drops were hitting her shoulders. She climbed into the cockpit, the familiar smell of warmed electronics and worn oxygen hose wrapping around her. The world narrowed. Harness, leg restraints, comms plug, battery. She flipped through the start sequence with practiced hands, while her mind tried to run a second track. Check in with AWACS, push to mission FREC, establish with Harbor, confirm IR strobe pattern, hold south of the coast until they break surface. "Ember, Ops," came a voice over the VHF. "You need to launch on schedule to make your on-station window. Tanker is not waiting." Copy. Of course. The tanker running a 30-minute cycle meant the whole night was clockwork. If she slid, everyone else did, and she'd be the weak link. The thought of showing up over that black water 10 minutes late and hearing Harbor already calling for air made her stomach tighten. She looked out past the HUD at the line of low clouds clawing in from the sea. If she asked for time now, extra minute to finish pre-mission review, Ops would hear, "Rookie not ready." They'd remember that tomorrow. She keyed the mic. "Ops, Ember, copy schedule. I'll brief in the climb." Morales appeared on the ladder again, leaning in to connect the comms. He studied her face for half a second. "You good, LT?" "I will be," she said. "Let's get her moving." "Roger." He thumped the cockpit rim, disappeared. Engines spooled, low and hungry, a vibration through the seat that calmed her in spite of everything. The A-10 was honest. It did what you told it. It was the rest of the world, politics, partial intel, tight ROE, that refused to line up. She taxied out in a spray of light rain, wipers clicking once across the canopy. The tower cleared her without delay. Everyone wanted her airborne before the curtain of weather dropped. As she held short, she forced herself to run the op in fast forward, seals in the water, blacked out. Patrols in 4 to 5 minutes after any anomaly. Her orbit would be inland offset to get around sea clutter. Harbor would only show himself at the end. 150 meters. No fires without JTAC. Call. If the patrols arrived early, she would have to ID them, warn them off with presence, maybe a low pass. If that failed, Ember Tower. Wind 320 at 15, cleared for takeoff. She pushed the throttles. The hog surged, heavy but willing, rolling into the dim runway lights. As the nose lifted, the airfield fell away into shadow. She felt the mild chop of the incoming front, saw the first smudge of rain on the right side of the glass. In the climb, with the ground finally dropping and the horizon vanishing into cloud, she let herself breathe. This was where she could build the rest of the picture. Call AWACS, pull the latest weather over the target, ask for confirmation on coastal lighting. She would make the plan while the jet 8 miles, but at the back of her mind, a quieter voice kept repeating the same thing. You don't know how many trucks. You don't know if they have thermals. You don't know if the seals will be on time. She tightened her harness, leveled into the departure, and pointed the nose toward the dark water anyway. The coastline appeared first as a darker smear against dark water, then resolved into angles in her pod as the A-10 leveled off over the cold sea. Below, the North Atlantic rolled black and indifferent, white caps barely visible through her NVGs. The overcast sat low, a flat ceiling that made the world feel compressed. Overwatch, Ember on station, Angels 3, pushing south of the objective for recce, she called. AWACS answered, distant but steady. Ember, Overwatch, radar picture clean, you are single ship. Harbor not up yet, single ship. No surprise, still heavy. She tipped the nose toward the shore and began a shallow turn into a racetrack pattern that would keep her parallel to the beach. The pod slewed where she looked, its monochrome image cutting through some of the murk, enough to make out the chalk line of surf, a narrow road running inland, a cluster of low buildings like knuckles. Sea clutter danced on the screen. At this altitude, the pod kept trying to lock on wave crests. She shifted gain, narrowed the field. Better, but not clean. Overwatch Ember. Cloud base is lower than briefed. I can work under it, but SA's gonna be degraded. Copy degraded SA. You are authorized to adjust within flight safety. Which was nice, and also meaningless. If she bent metal, no one would quote that back. She glanced at the altimeter, at the mass of cloud above. At 3,000 feet she was safe, but she was looking at the coast through a keyhole. The patrols Vaux and McCrae talked about wouldn't show as neat dots until they broke from cover. If they hugged the tree line or buildings, she'd pick them up too late. She eased the throttles back and let the hog sink. 2,500. 2,000. The sea felt closer, the texture of the waves sharper even in the dark. The overcast was now a lid just above her canopy. Any higher, and she'd be in it. Ember, flight level check? AWACS prompted, hearing the descent. Ember is 2,000 feet VMC maintaining, she replied, keeping her voice even. That was lower than the detachment commander would have liked for night over water, but it gave her a better look. She rolled out abeam the coast and pointed her pod inland, scanning along the road network, marking mental reference points. Small farmhouse, industrial shed, a grove. If a truck came down that road, she wanted to know how far it was from the beach without doing math. She flipped to the maritime frequency. Harbor Ember, comms check. Only static, of course. They were still underwater or en route. She was early by design. Air had to be. She completed the first leg of her racetrack, turned back out to sea, then in again. Each pass, she adjusted the pod a little lower, a little farther inland, feeling for anything warm that didn't belong. On the third pass, she found it. A heat bloom bloomed on the grayscale, not big, not bright like an engine at full load, but a cluster of warmth against otherwise cold terrain, three sources, moving in rough file along a narrow lane that led from the interior toward the road she'd marked. Vehicles, lights blacked out, moving slowly like they weren't in a hurry yet. Her throat tightened. Overwatch Ember. I've got possible ground movers, 3, maybe 4, grid to follow. Send it, AWACS said. She read off the coordinates, eyes never leaving the pod display. The vehicles kept moving. They weren't right on the coast yet, a few kilometers inland, but they were heading the right direction. Ember, Overwatch. No friendly ground traffic in that area. Copy no friendlies. Marking as potential Patrol 1. She dropped a mark, named it, Patrol 1. She zoomed out to see if there were more. There were. Farther inland, fuzzier through the humidity, another pair of heat sources separated by several hundred meters, angled toward a different access point. Not in a rush, not lights and sirens, but converging, like a net being drawn. She felt the hollowness of having no wingman. If there'd been a second jet, he could have taken the eastern approach while she watched the main road. As it was, she had to bounce her sensor back and forth, afraid of what she'd miss in the 2 seconds she was looking away. Overwatch Ember. Be advised, multiple potential patrols are active and trending coastward earlier than briefed. Copied. Tracking. Time to harbor? Negative contact with harbor, she said, assuming they're still submerged, which meant the SEALs didn't know yet that the locals were on the move. She imagined them in the dark water, heads down, fighting the current, while trucks above them casually drove toward the same piece of isolated shoreline. She sank another 100 feet without quite meaning to, chasing a better angle on the second patrol. The waves filled more of the canopy now. A wrong move and she'd be in spray. Ember, Overwatch, confirm altitude. Ember 2000 even, she said, nudging back up. Need to stay below the deck to maintain visual on approaches. A pause. Then, approved. Maintain safety. She almost laughed. She was already well past comfortable. On the next pass, she pulled the picture together. 2 patrol elements inland, both able to reach the beach in under 10 minutes if they accelerated. A road that funneled directly into the exfil lane, SEALs not yet up. The geometry was starting to look wrong. The window was narrowing before the players were even on stage. She keyed the mic again, this time to Ops. Ops, Ember on station. Be advised, local patrols active and trending earlier. Recommend you pass to Harbor at first contact. If Harbor got the word in time, maybe he'd shave a minute off the diver's route. If not, she'd be the only one ready when headlights, or worse, dark trucks, broke onto the sand. Out over the water, alone under the low cloud, she tightened her racetrack and watched the heat blooms crawl coastward. The first call from Harbor came thin and wet, the way radios always sounded when the person talking was surrounded by cold water. Ember, Harbor. Surf is heavier than forecast. We're behind by, call it 4. Alina's eyes were on the pod, tracking the lead patrol element as it nosed through a line of low trees. 4 minutes? On land, 4 minutes was a shrug. On a night mission with a tight exfil window and patrols already moving, 4 minutes was the space where plans died. Harbor Ember. Say again, delay for clarity. 4. Maybe 5 if we fight current on the way out. We still green. Still green. They weren't aborting themselves. They were telling her they intended to make it work and expected the air to make it work with them. She switched to the command net. Overwatch Ember. Harbor reports minor delay in dive phase, still green. There was a pause as AWACS did exactly what she feared. They checked that word against the rest of the picture. Ember, Overwatch. You've got multiple ground movers trending to the coast inside your window. Define minor delay. She glanced at the HUD clock. The op window for kinetic action, the slice of time where everyone could plausibly say we were still in the act of protecting U.S. personnel, was not endless. It was tied to the assumption that the divers would surface and depart at X time, push X, and every shot she took after that would need twice the paperwork. Overwatch Ember, she said, keeping her tone businesslike. Harbor indicates 4, sea state related. They assess exfil still achievable inside current parameters. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't the whole thing either. Copy, AWACS said finally. Be advised, any hostile act after planned exfil time may require higher authority. There it was, the invisible ceiling lowering over her. She pictured the men in the water, barely personalities to her, and then pictured the patrol trucks. very real in her pod, coming down hard-packed roads with no concern for politics. One side was slowing, the other was speeding up. She was the hinge in the middle. She tightened her racetrack again, closer to the coast. The A-10 rode the low air rougher now. Chop from the onshore wind jostled the jet as she banked. In the pod, the first patrol group gained the main coastal road and turned toward the beach. Their speed increased. They were no longer patrolling, they were responding. Overwatch, Ember. Patrol 1 now accelerated, ETA coast under 8. Ember, Overwatch, Roger. Any sign of harbor on surface? Negative, they're still submerged. She wanted to tell AWACS that 8 minutes was a best case if nothing else accelerated, and tonight everything accelerated. Instead, she flipped back to Harbor's Freck. Harbor Ember, patrols are on the move earlier than briefed. Recommend you expedite surface. Static then. Yeah, we read you. We're pushing. That current's a... He cut himself off, professional again. We'll make the lane. They were fighting water. The trucks were not. She checked the time again. If she gave command the full truth, they're 4 to 5 late and the patrols are 4 to 5 early. Smart people in warm rooms might decide the risk profile was blown and pull the plug. And in a clean world, that would be the correct call. Abort, live to try another night. But a weapons line moved once wasn't always catchable twice, and Vo had said, "We need the exfil lane." That was not the voice of someone who had tomorrow as an option. So she chose. Overwatch, Ember, she said. Update, harbor reports making up time. I assess we remain inside workable window if patrols don't accelerate further. It was phrased carefully, still accurate, still defensible, but lighter around the edges than reality. Copy your assessment, AWACS said. There. She'd put her name on it. The emotional weight came a beat later. Her mouth went dry. By softening the truth, she'd bought the SEALs a chance to finish. She'd also accepted that, if the beach turned into a knife fight and she had to fire danger close a few minutes past the official time, the question, why were they still there, would come back to her transmission. She pushed the thought down and went back to the pod. Patrol 1 was now clearly 2 trucks. A third heat spot appeared farther back. Patrol 2, the one she'd tagged as secondary, had also picked up speed, perhaps in response to the first element's radio call. The net was drawing tight over a beach that, right now, had no friendly strobes on it. Ember Overwatch. Weather over your area is expected to deteriorate in 15. Advise if you need to climb. Negative. I need to stay low to maintain visual on inland approaches, she said. I'll advise if I lose it. The cloud ceiling was another ticking clock. If she had to climb, the pod would lose some of the contrast she was depending on, and trucks could close the last half-kilometer unseen. The night kept peeling away her margins, one by one. Harbor, Ember, status, she asked again, sharper this time. Still pushing. First team will be up close to your mark. Second team may be 90 seconds behind. 90 seconds. Add it to the 4 or 5. Add it to the trucks that were now less than 8 from the coast. Her mental timeline became a set of overlapping circles, none of them clean. Roger, she said. I'll hold the lane. She would hold it by being here, by seeing, by being willing to do the thing that was hardest to explain. Out over the dark water, alone, she watched the hot shapes on land crawl seaward and knew she'd just traded certainty for loyalty. She found the weapons line almost by accident, sweeping the pod wider to see what else was moving inland. Past the patrols she'd already tagged, farther along a rough-cut service road, A string of hotter signatures crawled through the darkness. Heavier, more consistent, engines working harder than the local pickups. She narrowed the field of view. Not one or two trucks. 4, then a fifth, offset. 2 of them rode higher, boxier, cargo. The rearmost pair ran tighter to the sides like escorts. Every few seconds, one of those escorts flicked a cigarette of heat sideways. Probably a gunner moving, a door opening. This wasn't casual traffic. "Overwatch, Ember," she said, eyes locked to the screen. "I have possible primary convoy, 5 vehicles, 2 probable cargo, 3 security, moving west-northwest toward the coastal road. Ember, Overwatch, copy 5 vehicles. Intel had that at 3, AWAC said. Can you confirm armament? Stand by. She bumped the zoom. The IR image shimmered as the air between them shifted, but then a shape resolved on the bed of the second escort. A mounted weapon, squat and purposeful. Local pattern gun truck. The lead cargo truck had 2 heat sources in front of the cab, likely additional personnel or add-on armor. Overwatch, Ember, at least 1 mounted weapon in the escort. This is a harder package than briefed. She could practically hear the recalculation on the other end. A small, low-visibility transfer was one thing. A multi-vehicle element with guns was another. Ember, Overwatch. RO remains unchanged. Hostile act or intent only. Of course it did. She tracked the convoy for another minute. It wasn't heading straight to the beach yet, but its bearing would intersect the same coastal road the patrols were already on. If they all arrived together, the SEALs would be pushing boats off a shoreline watched by half a dozen rifles and at least 1 crew-served weapon. Harbor Ember, she called on the maritime net. Be advised, possible primary convoy is heavier than expected, trending toward your exfil road. There was a pause longer than static. They understood what that meant. Ember Harbor, copy heavy. We're still below, about to surface. We do not want them on the beach. Roger that, she said quietly. Neither did she. This was the moment to ask for permission to preempt, to suggest a strike east of the coast, where there'd be no chance of friendly interference. She could pickle a Maverick into the road, disable the lead, let the rest pile behind it. Clean, controlled, far enough from the exfil lane that no one would be hit by accident. But nothing in the ROE said she could do that just because she didn't like the odds. The convoy hadn't done anything hostile to U.S. forces. Right now, it was just moving, and command had been clear. Minimize signature. A missile into a foreign road on a night they were trying to pretend they weren't there was the opposite of that. Her jaw clenched. She watched the lead vehicle slow at a junction, then turn exactly the wrong way toward the coast. Overwatch Ember, convoy is now westbound on the coastal feeder. If they maintain this route, they will reach the beach vicinity near our exfil window. Ember Overwatch, acknowledged. You are to maintain observation. Do not engage without JTC clearance. Maintain observation. Watch the problem arrive. She tagged each truck in the system, giving them alpha designations, A1 through A5. The screen filled with her own icons, patrols, convoy, the beach. It looked like a board with too many enemy pieces and not enough of hers. She let the hog drift a little closer to land again, under the ceiling, squeezing every bit of resolution from the pod. In the escort truck, a figure stood briefly in the back, heat signature flaring against the cooler night, like he was stretching or checking his weapon. That gun could rake a beach fast. Harbor Ember, patrol elements and heavy convoy both trending to you. You're going to have multiple contacts on the sand. We see it, Harbor said. We're about to break surface. We need a clean lane. Clean. She almost laughed. There was nothing clean about what was coming. She glanced at her weapons page anyway. GAU-8 armed and ready. Mavericks green. The knowledge was a comfort. She had tools. But tools didn't change rules. She rolled into the next leg of the racetrack, mind running ahead. If she waited until they were on the beach, she could claim hostile intent. Armed vehicles closing on exposed U.S. personnel. No commander would fault her for firing then. But by that time, the trucks would be inside the 150-meter bubble. She could strafe carefully, walk, rounds away. But any deviation, any bounce on the wet sand, and she could cut down the very men she was there to protect. If she hit them now, on the road, she could shape the fight. But she would be the pilot who fired without hostile act, on foreign soil, during a covert op. Every debrief would have her name on the slide. She exhaled through her nose. Ember holding, marking convoy, will engage on JTAC call. It was the professional answer. It was also the one that made her stomach hurt. Copy, Ember, Harbor said. We'll call it. She imagined him standing in a wet boat, NVGs dripping, about to bring cold, tired men into the surf, knowing that somewhere inland, armored teeth were rolling toward him. He was trusting her to kill them when he said to. Not before, not after. Overwatch, Ember, she added, forcing steadiness. Recommend higher, be notified convoy strength increased. If we lose surprise, they have enough guns to contest exfil. Recommendation noted and passed, AWACS said. Below, the line of hot vehicles kept coming, bending toward the water like they'd always intended to be there. Fuel had been a quiet drumbeat in the back of her head since she checked in. Now it was loud. The Hog was solid, but not magical. Low orbits under weather at night, with frequent turns to keep the pod on moving targets, burned more than clean, high racetracks. She glanced at the fuel readout and did the math again against the distance to the tanker track. Ember, Overwatch, AWACS called. Be advised, Warthog 2 is pushing to tanker. Expect him back on station in approximately 30 mics. That was Captix Vic. Her safety net, gone. Copy, she said. She could hear him on the other freck a moment later, voice casual. Ember, 2, I'm off to drink. Try not to break the war while I'm gone. She keyed back. Enjoy the view, 2. The banter was thin. They both knew what it meant. For the next half hour, anything that happened over that black strip of coastline was on her. She looked back at the pod. The first patrol had reached the coastal road and was now less than a kilometer from the beach access. The convoy, the heavy one, was making good time, still a few minutes back, but not enough to relax. And somewhere in the cold water, just off the sand, the seals were trying to surface into this mess. Overwatch, Ember, current fuel is, she read the number. I can make tanker on time. Roger, Ember. Recommend you push on your scheduled window to preserve station. Recommend. That was the voice of doctrine. CAS aircraft went to tanker when it was their turn, not when it was convenient. That's how you kept coverage over hours. But coverage over hours didn't help men who were going to be on a beach in 9 minutes. She hesitated, watching the patrol truck on her screen bounce over a rut. If she pulled off station now, she'd need to climb, head to the refueling track, plug, take on gas, return, descend, rebuild SA. Even with everything going right, she'd be blind for a chunk of time that coincided exactly with the most fragile phase of the op. Harbor, Ember, she said, buying herself seconds. Status? We're on the surface, Harbor replied, breath ragged with cold or effort. First team is boarding, second team in the water. We are exposed. Exposed. That settled it. She flipped back. Overwatch Ember. I request to remain on station through current critical phase. I have enough to RTB after. A longer pause this time. Somebody in the big radar plane was weighing fuel safety against an operator on a dark beach. Ember, Overwatch. Say your bingo. She gave it. It wasn't reckless, but it didn't leave much room for surprises. Another voice cut in, Vic, already climbing toward tanker. Ember, 2, don't get cute with the gas. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, even though no one could see her. -2. We've got active ground movers and friendlies exposed. I need to keep eyes on. Overwatch, Vic said on the command loop. I recommend she cycles. We can't have her tight on fuel in that weather. It was the responsible thing for a flight lead to say. It also threatened to pull the decision out of her hands. She forced calm into her voice. Overwatch Ember. If I leave, there is 0 air on station while friendlies are on surface. Patrol elements are less than 1 kilometer from the beach. Convoy is inbound. I recommend deferring tanker until exfil complete. This time, when AWACS came back, the tone had shifted. Someone had decided the risk they preferred. Ember Overwatch. Approved to hold on station until exfil complete or fuel state dictates. Report when you hit Joker. Copy. Hold until exfil or Joker. Vic came back, drier. Your call, Ember. Don't make me come fish you out. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was her call. If the fuel numbers got too low, no one would praise her for loyalty. They'd ask why she hadn't gone when she could. But if she'd left, and the trucks had hit while she was refueling, she'd never stop hearing about that either. She checked the pod again. The front patrol swung onto the final stretch of road, a straight run to the sand. Her A-10 turned parallel with it, each of them advancing toward the same point from different heights. The convoy behind it was now close enough that she could see individual bodies in the truck bed. Harbor Ember, Patrol 1 is less than 5 from you. Convoy under 10, you need to move. We're moving, Harbor said, tight. We'll be in the surf in 1, keep them off us. Wilco. She nudged the jet another hair lower, just enough to keep the pod looking under the cloud, but not so low she was scraping weather. The fuel number ticked down. She acknowledged it and let it sit in the corner of her mind. She was, for all practical purposes, the only friendly weapon system in the sky over that beach now. Every warning, every threat call, every decision about whether to fire would come from her. It felt like stepping out on a narrow beam with cold water on both sides. Ember, Overwatch. Weather worsening over the tanker track. Keep us advised of your fuel. Copy, she said, and copy worsening weather. Down below, lights flickered as the patrol trucks hit rougher ground. Not headlights, just the brief flare of an interior bulb. They were almost on the sand. Alina curled her fingers tighter around the stick. This was the geometry she'd been dreading. Friendlies still in the water, bad guys almost at the beach, and her with just enough fuel to fight, but not enough to waste. The next turn over the coast would decide whether she broke ROE or let men die. She rolled in toward land. The beach finally showed signs of life. Not from the land, but from the water. 2 dark shapes broke the surface just outside the surf line, silhouettes too low and disciplined to be anything but the seal boats. IR strobes winked on the bow of the lead, just like McCrae had promised. 2 in line, tight, a little halo around them from spray. Harbor Ember, visual on your boats, Alina said. You are within 150 of my nose. Copy. First team is loading. We are exposed. Harbor answered, breath still rough. At the same time, the first patrol truck punched through the last screen of dunes and scrub, and dropped onto the hard sand. In her pod, it flared hot against the colder beach, front tires throwing light plumes of sand. A second truck followed, offset, giving itself an angle on the water. Behind them, farther up the access road, the heavier convoy's lead vehicle appeared, slower, but coming. It was exactly the geometry she'd hoped to avoid. Friendlies in the water, threats on the sand, and her overhead with a weapons envelope that said no, right where she needed yes. "Overwatch, Ember," she called, eyes never leaving the pod. "Patrol vehicles are on the beach. Repeat, on the beach. Friendlies still embarking." "Ember, Overwatch. Row remains in effect. You are not cleared to fire within 150 without JTAC." Of course she wasn't. The first truck accelerated parallel to the waterline, trying to get closer, trying to see. Maybe they'd expected a smuggler boat, not men in black dry suits hauling gear. Maybe they didn't care. Either way, in another 10 seconds they'd be close enough to engage with rifles. "Harbor Ember. You have 2 vehicles on the sand, a third inbound. I can deter." "Deter fast," Harbor said. "We're not all on." He hadn't said engage. He'd said deter. That meant noise, presence, the big gray warplane dropping low enough to make locals think twice. It did not mean 30 millimeters. She shoved the throttles up and rolled the A-10 inland, then down toward the coastline. The jet responded with that satisfied, heavy eagerness, dropping its nose through the dim. The cloud base rushed closer above. The beach rushed closer below. Spray from the wind-pushed sea blurred the edge of her canopy. "Ember descending for show of force," she reported. She came in from the landward side so the trucks would have to look up into her. At 200 feet AGL, the beach was a strip, the trucks distinct, figures by the water bent over someone. A diver, maybe, slower to climb in. She lit the landing lights for a second, a glaring, unnatural cone of white in the night, then killed them. Let them see, let them know. The first truck did jerk, tires slewing as the driver looked up, but it didn't stop. It corrected, now angling closer to the boats. Not deterrable then. Her thumb hovered over the master arm. One click, and the jet would go from observation to threat. One more, and the GAU-8 would be ready to turn trucks into scrap. She could do a short, tight burst in front of them, a wall of sand and shock that'd make any driver back off. But the boats, the men in the surf, 150 meters was nothing at this height. "Ember Harbor," came McCrae's voice, even through the adrenaline. "We are still loading. You shoot now. You might hit us." "I know," she said, louder than she meant to. She pulled up 5-10 feet, searching for any angle that would let her rake the trucks away from the water instead of toward it. The second patrol truck's door swung open. A man climbed out with something slung, not clear enough for PID as a rifle at this speed, but clear enough in her gut. The third vehicle from the heavier convoy was almost off the access road now. She had seconds before the scene became unmanageable. "Overwatch, Ember. Patrols are closing on exposed U.S. personnel. I assess hostile intent." "Ember, Overwatch. JTAC must confirm," the controller said, because that was their job. "Fine." "Harbor Ember. I can take them now, but it's going to be danger close. Say the words." On the water, in view of speeding trucks, McCrae had to weigh the same thing she was weighing: rules, safety, men in his boat. When he came back, there was no hesitation. "Ember Harbor. Cleared hot, danger close. Keep your fire landward." Cleared hot. She flicked master arm, selected gun. The low growl of the GAU's spin-up bled through the cockpit, a physical promise. She rolled slightly to open the line, brought the pipper forward of the first truck, judged distance to the surf out of the corner of her eye. She could walk the rounds up the beach, starting inland, scare them sideways. She could. If her hand didn't shake. If the wind didn't push a tracer toward the water. If a diver didn't stumble in the wrong direction. Ember Harbor, we are still. She exhaled once, slow, the way they'd taught her to before gunnery. The jet steadied in her hands, and the pipper steadied on the sand just ahead of the lead truck. The shoreline flickered at the edge of her vision. White water, black hulls, a man half in, half out of a boat. Crosswind from the sea nudged the hog sideways, and she caught it with a touch of rudder, refusing to let the nose wander. Ember, harbor, boat's not clear. McCrae's warning chased her down the run. I've got you, she said, though he couldn't see the way her forearm had gone rigid. Coming in. She squeezed. The GAU-8's voice was a tearing, metallic bellow that filled the cockpit and seemed to shove the jet backward. She felt it in her spine. On the beach, a line of orange sparks walked from inland toward the lead truck, chewing sand and throwing up a dirty curtain. She'd started the burst farther from the water than she wanted, then corrected, tapping the stick to drag the pattern closer to the vehicles. The first truck reacted instantly. It slewed away from the impacts, tires digging, driver choosing survival over whatever task he'd been sent to do. The second truck braked hard, sand pluming, the man who'd just stepped out throwing himself back behind the door. Good effects! Harbor shouted, the urgency cracking through. Again! Keep them off the water! But even in that praise was the knife edge. Keep them off the water. Not off us. Not anywhere your rounds might skip. She could have extended, climbed, set up a neater second pass. That was what the schoolhouse would have wanted. Unhurried geometry, stable release, textbook. But the third vehicle, the one from the heavier convoy, was just now grinding down the access path, its bulk promising more guns, more men. If she gave it the time, it would spill onto the same sand she was trying to clear. Ember, overwatch, the controller cut in, strained. Confirm you are danger close firing. Affirm, she said, already rolling out to reattack. JTAC cleared hot. That would be on the tape now, locked in, JTAC authority, pilot acknowledgement. If anyone on the beach was hit by ricochet, those words would be replayed frame by frame. She banked hard left, the hog heavy but obedient, salt spray smearing briefly across the canopy. Altitude bled faster than she liked. She added power, brought the nose back up, then rolled right to line up again from a shallower inland angle. She wanted her beaten zone to push the trucks backward, not sideways toward the boats. Ember Harbor. We've got one man slow, repeat, one man slow. We need 5 seconds. Buying it. This time she came in lower still, under the cloud, so close she could see the texture of the dunes and NVGs. The trucks were in disarray now, the lead reversing, the second trying to turn, the third, heavier, hesitating at the bottom of the access, like its driver wasn't sure the beach was worth it anymore. Perfect. She armed her mind to the distance. Start here, end there. Do not walk it, to the water. Do not. She fired. Shorter burst, controlled. The cannon hammered, and a second line of impacts stitched across the sand just in front of the trucks, closer than sane to the boats but still landward. Sand fountained, chunks of something, bumper, boardwalk, flew. The heavy vehicle jolted to a halt, then began to back up, driver deciding this strip of shoreline belonged to someone else tonight. Beautiful, Ember, Harbor yelled. That's it, Keep them back! She pulled up, heart slamming against the harness. For half a second, she was certain she'd dragged a tracer too far. Certain she'd see a boat jolt, a man drop, her eyes cut to the pod, hunting. The image steadied. Boats intact. Figures still moving, one being hauled the last foot by two others. Spray and smoke drifted across the frame, making it messy, but there was no obvious friendly hit. She let out a breath so shaky she was glad no one could hear it. Ember, Overwatch. You are recorded firing inside 150 of friendly position. Confirm JTAC clearance will be on your tape. Affirm JTAC cleared danger close, 2 passes, she said, forcing her voice back to flat. Effects achieved. Vehicles are disengaging. Copy. No judgment, not yet. That would come in rooms with lights and coffee. Below, the first 2 patrol trucks were already turning nose to land, trying to put dunes between themselves and the angry aircraft. The heavy convoy Liad had stopped entirely, like a herd animal that had caught scent of a predator. She'd bought the boat space, not a lot, but enough. Harbor, Ember. You look clear for the moment. How many loaded? First boat's off, McCrae answered, relief hot in his words. Second boat loading now. You keep them scared. We're out of here. Wilco. She climbed just enough to reset, to get her pod clear of the drifting dust. Her fuel number was lower than she liked now, a quiet reminder that she couldn't stay in this knife fight forever. But she stayed low over the shoreline, making sure every driver on that beach knew she could roll in again if they even thought about chasing the boats into the surf. The adrenaline receded and left behind a hard, cold awareness. The gun tape would show 2 very precise passes well within the 150-meter bubble. It would also show trucks turning away and boats getting off the sand. It was the right call. It was also the kind of right call that came with scars. Ember, Harbor said after a beat, voice steadier now that one boat was moving. Couldn't have done that without you. She swallowed. Let's just get everyone home. Out over the darkening water, the A-10 leveled, nose pointed along the retreating boats. On the beach, for the first time in minutes, nothing advanced. The first boat pulled away, bow lifting over the chop, twin IR strobes bobbing like distant stars. In her pod, it was a white smear against the cold ocean, receding from the danger. For a heartbeat, Alina let herself feel it. That tiny, clean success. They were moving. Then the second boat didn't. It was still too close to the surf line, men clustered around something low on the deck. One of them lifted an arm toward the beach, as if to ward off fire that wasn't coming yet. The patrol trucks were hiding now, but hiding wasn't the same as gone. Harbor, Ember, second boat is still in the pocket, she said, already banking back toward the shoreline. Ember, Harbor, McCrae answered, breath back to rough. We've got a casualty with gear hung up. We are 30 seconds. 30 seconds was forever on an exposed beach with angry locals a few dunes away. She scanned inland again. The lead patrol truck had taken cover behind scrub, engine still hot. The heavy convoy was stopped on the access like someone was on the radio, deciding whether to try again. Nothing else was racing to the water. Yet. She could have climbed, backed off to 2,000 or 3,000 feet, used the pod to watch a wider swath inland for any new threats. It would have been the smarter, commander-approved thing. Get your SA back. But the second boat needed a bully right now, not a distant guardian. Staying low, she muttered, half to herself. She pushed the nose down again and came back along the beach parallel to the water, low enough that any man on the sand would hear the turbofans before he thought about taking a shot. Overwatch Ember, I am remaining low for exfil cover. Ember, Overwatch, Roger. Advise fuel. She glanced. The number was not good, not terrible, but it drew a line in the near future. I can hold for current exfil. Then I'm RTB. Copy. She popped a brief IR flood over the water, a soft wash on the sensor spectrum, not visible to naked eyes on shore but bright as day to anyone in NVGs on those boats. A cue. This is me. This is the corridor. Go there. Harbor Ember, IR up. Follow it seaward once you're off. Copy. Still working the patient. In her pod she saw it. 2 SEALs bent over a man on the deck, cutting or yanking at something near his leg, another holding him steady as the boat rocked. Maybe he'd taken debris from her gun run. The thought stabbed quick and cold. Or maybe he'd just twisted wrong in the surf. Either way, they weren't leaving him. She rolled her shoulders, kept the A-10 in a long, low leg just offshore, nose pointed toward the dune line. If any of the trucks broke cover, she could be on top of them in seconds. She didn't want to fire again. Every round was another frame on the tape. But she would. Ember, came Harbor again. We are off the beach. Repeat, off the beach, still slow. In the pod, the second boat finally punched through the last of the breakers, engine wash glowing. It was lower and heavier than the first, trimmed down by the extra weight of the casualty. It would take longer to accelerate and reach whatever rendezvous they had seaward. Roger, I've got you, she said. Recommend you keep a bearing 180 for 1 minute, then go dark. I'll parallel. Sounds good. She slid the hog out to sea alongside them, maintaining offset so she didn't throw rotor wash over the little craft. At this angle, if anyone on shore got bold and tried to take a parting shot, they'd be silhouetted for her and for the tape. Inland, one of the patrol trucks eased forward a meter like the driver was testing whether the Dragon had left. She twitched the nose their way, just enough. The truck froze. Nice, McCrae said, voice looser now, adrenaline ebbing. They don't like you. Mutual, Alina said. She checked fuel again. Margin shrinking. Weather over the tanker track would still be bad. She needed to leave soon. Overwatch Ember. Both boats are off, moving seaward. Ground elements appear to be disengaging. I will remain on this leg for 30 seconds, then egress. Ember, Overwatch. Copy. Your earlier danger close will be captured. Expect follow-up. There it was, spoken plainly. Expect follow-up. Not nice work, not you saved them. Just the bureaucracy approaching. Understood. On the water, the first boat was now a healthy distance out, wake trailing. The second began to pick up speed at last. Bow lifting, someone forward throwing a quick wave in her direction, just an arm against the Black Sea. Harbor Ember, you are clear of effective small arms from shore. I am aggressing. Ember, McCrae said. And this time there was something like gratitude, heavy and real. We owe you beers we're not going to talk about. She felt her mouth pull into a tired half-smile. Just put it in the AAR. Yeah, he said. We will. She climbed at last, easing the hog back up toward the overcast, the beach dropping away, the trucks shrinking into indistinct smudges. Up here, away from the salt and the immediate danger, the night looked ordinary again. Instruments, fuel, headings. But the tape in her jet was not ordinary. It showed 2 gun passes inside 150 meters, and a pilot who chose to stay low on an exfil instead of grabbing SA. It showed loyalty bigger than the rules. Overwatch, Ember, exfil complete. I am RTB with low fuel, request direct. Ember, Overwatch, cleared RTB, contact approach. As she turned for home, The adrenaline left a hollow behind her ribs. The SEALs were alive. She had done what she said she'd do. And now she was flying toward rooms with lights where they would pause the footage and ask, gently or not, why she'd made the beach look like that. The debrief room was too bright after the cockpit. Fluorescence hummed, whiteboard bare, projector already on and frozen on the first frame of her gun tape. A grainy monochrome beach. 2 trucks half turned. A faint wash of sea in the corner. It looked almost calm like that. Paused. It didn't show her pulse or the way the wind had been shoving at the jet. Alina sat at the end of the table, flight suit still zipped, G-suit peeled halfway down, hair damp where the headset had pressed it. Across from her were 2 Air Force officers from Ops, a Navy intel lieutenant, and CMDR von Captain. Vic leaned against the wall, arms crossed, expression neutral. Whoever edited the attendance list had decided this was joint business. Okay, said Maj. Harlan, the APS officer, clicking a pen. We're going to walk through the engagement. We have audio. We have ROE on the board behind you. We're going to ask direct questions. We need direct answers. Understood, Lieutenant Reyes? Yes, sir. He nodded to the tech. The video rolled. There was her first pass, nose down, pipper steady, shots walking across the sand. The GAU's sound overlaid the room in tinny, recorded brutality. On the screen, the trucks cringed away just like she remembered. Pause, Harlan said. The image froze mid-spray. He pointed his pen. This frame, timestamp 2241 Zulu. Your aircraft is firing within the 150-meter no-fire bubble. Yes, sir, Alina said. ROE, item 3, Harlan went on, tapping the board without looking. No fires inside 150 meters of declared friendly position without JTAC clearance. He tilted his head. Why did you shoot? Because the patrol vehicles were closing on exposed U.S. personnel, and the JTAC cleared danger close, she said. She kept her tone even, not defensive. This was the same answer she'd given in the cockpit, only now the carpet was warm and no one was drowning. The Navy lieutenant leaned forward. Did you consider a second show of force instead of live fire? I executed a show of force on the initial run, Alina said. Vehicles did not disengage. They continued to close on the boats. At that point, I assessed deterrence was insufficient. Vo's eyes stayed on the screen, not on Alina. Harbor said they still had a man in the water. Yes, ma'am, he said. We're not all on. So you knew, Harlan said. You were firing with friendlies still mucking around in the surf. Yes, sir. Why not delay for 10 seconds and let them clear? Because, sir, the first truck was inside effective small arms range. If they started shooting at the boats, I would have had to fire anyway, with the added complication of incoming rounds. Shooting earlier bought the boats a clean departure. The Navy intel officer frowned. You couldn't PID weapons. I PID'd armed security in the convoy inland, Alina said. And on the beach, while I couldn't see a weapon clearly in that frame, I had multiple vehicles that had ignored a low pass and were continuing toward my friendlies. In the total context, patrols alerted, convoy heavier than briefed, SEALs delayed, I assessed hostile intent. It came out more formal than she felt, but she needed the formal words. Someone, somewhere, would read the transcript. Vic spoke up from the wall. You were low. Yes, sir. How low? She gave the number. A couple heads tilted, impressed or disapproving. That's lower than recommended over water at night, Harlan said. Yes, sir, she said again. But I needed the angle to keep the beaten zone landward. At a higher altitude, dispersion would have made it harder to guarantee rounds didn't walk into the boats. That actually made a couple of them stop. Because it was true. She'd gone lower to make it safer. Vo finally looked at her. "Harbor's report is filed," she said. "He confirmed he cleared you hot, danger close, and that your fire made the vehicles break." A breath she hadn't planned to take left Alina. "Good." "But," Vo added, "he also said you and he both knew you were inside 150. "Yes, ma'am, we both knew." The Navy intel officer tapped her tablet. "Why didn't you pass the full 4 to 5 minute delay earlier to Overwatch, Lieutenant? If Command knew the timelines were squeezing that hard, we might have retasked, or at least recalculated the ROE for the window." There it was, the other piece. Alina met her eyes. This was the spot where she could have deflected. Comms congestion, bad copy, misunderstood. Instead, she said what had happened. "I softened the delay," she said. "Harbor was fighting sea state. They were still green. If I'd reported it as a full 5, I assessed there was a chance you'd consider aborting. The operators were already in the water." The room went quiet. On the frozen screen, her aircraft hung over a beach full of spray. "So you made that call," Harlan said slowly. "For them." "Yes, sir." "You understand that withholding the full delay contributed to you being on station, alone, with a compressed timeline and moving hostiles?" "Yes, sir," she said again. "I own that." Vic's eyes flicked from her to Harlan, as if to say, "She said it. Let it stand." Vo uncrossed her arms. "For what it's worth, Lieutenant, your action saved my team a gunfight on the sand. That's not in dispute." "Thank you, ma'am." "But," Vo said, and there was no give in it, "the tape is the tape. Hire is going to look at the fact you fired within 150 after we emphasized it in the brief. You'll probably get asked why you didn't climb, why you didn't wait, why you didn't use a missile on the access instead." Alina nodded. "I'll tell them the same thing. At that moment, on that beach, a gun run was the only thing fast enough and controllable enough to keep those trucks off the water." Harlan capped his pen. "We're elevating. You'll sit for a formal review. In the meantime, you're not grounded, but don't plan on another op tonight." That stung more than she expected. Not grounded, but benched. "Yes, sir," she said. As the others stood, Vo paused beside her. "I told you we'd back you if it was justified," she murmured. "I'm backing you, but next time don't make me back a surprise." Alina met her gaze. "Next time, ma'am, don't give me a beach with trucks already halfway down it." Vo's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but not anger. Then she was gone. Alina stayed a second longer, looking at the frozen frame of her rounds cutting the sand. It was all so clean here. No salt on the glass, no wind, no boats rocking. Just a decision, captured perfectly, waiting to be judged. They let her shower first. Not out of kindness, she thought, but because she still smelled like jet and cold sea, and no one wanted that in the admin spaces. By the time she walked down the corridor toward the joint ops bay, hair still damp, the night had rolled fully in outside the narrow windows. The building hummed with low voices and printer noise. The quiet after an op, when everyone was writing what they'd just done so someone else could judge it later. The Navy side of the room was a knot of dark shirts and laptops. A corpsman in a blue jacket moved through with a clipboard, talking in shorthand. Alina paused just outside their circle, feeling out of place in sage green. Lieutenant Unsung Vo spotted her. "Lieutenant." "Ma'am." Alina kept her hands loosely behind her back. "I need to ask about your men." "Which part?" Vo said. She looked tired now, eyes reddened from salt or stress. "On the second boat," Alina said. "You said there was a casualty with gear hung. I need to know if it was for me. For half a second, Vo's expression closed, the way it had in the initial brief. That automatic wall of compartmentalization. This is ours. That's yours. Don't cross. Then she nodded toward the corner. Talk to Chief McCrae. He rowed the boat. McCrae was sitting on a folding chair, wetsuit unzipped to his waist, a towel around his shoulders. His hair was plastered down in messy curls. He looked like he'd stepped straight off the North Atlantic and into... He looked up when Alina stopped in front of him. Ma'am. Chief. She didn't circle. Your man. How bad? Not bad, McCrae said at once, like he'd been expecting the question. He caught a bit of debris on the calf when your rounds hit the sand high. Not the round itself. Stuffed the sand through. We wrapped it. He walked it. Alina's shoulders loosened an inch. So, no penetration. Nope. McCrae's mouth quirked. If you'd waited, he might have caught 7.62 instead. I'll take sand. She exhaled. The picture in her head, a man bleeding out in the bottom of the boat because she'd dragged the pipper too far, dimmed. Replaced by a smaller, grittier one, a man swearing because sand and splinters were in his leg, alive to be annoyed about it. Medical will log it? She said. Yeah, McCrae said. It'll sit in our report. It won't say A-10 shot him. It'll say minor injury due to debris during air support. Because that's what it was. She glanced past him to the corpsman. I can talk to him? McCrae tilted his head, reading her. You want to hear it from the medic? Or you want to make sure we're not downplaying it to protect you? She met his eyes. I want to know exactly what I did, Chief. If I hurt someone, I need to carry it, not have it smoothed out. That seemed to land. He jerked his chin at the corpsman. Hey, Doc. Air Force wants to know if she ventilated anyone. The corpsman came over, amused. Nobody ventilated. Some abrasion, some embedded sand, BP stable. He's eating chow right now, complaining that the boat was cold. You did not ruin his night, ma'am. Thank you, Alina said. And she meant it more than she thought she would. Vo had come closer. This doesn't erase the fact you fired inside the bubble, she said quietly. Command will still chew it. I know, Alina said. I just needed to know it wasn't for nothing. Vo studied her for a second. You could have let the trucks close and blamed the ROE. That's not the job, Alina said, almost before thinking. Then she added, because here it mattered. You said you'd back me if it was justified. I wanted to make sure it was. It was, Vo said. Operationally, politically, she tipped a hand. We'll see. That was the other piece. The injury was minor. The men were off the beach. But the tape would still go up, and someone in a headquarters far from saltwater would still ask why a junior pilot took that much initiative. They would not have the smell of neoprene and cold boat diesel in their noses when they watched it. McCrae stood, joints cracking. For what it's worth, ma'am, I've had worse from my own guys throwing frags. You did good. Your man's leg says I did. Mostly good, she said, allowing herself a thin smile. Mostly good beats mostly dead, McCrae said. Put that in the AAR. She nodded and stepped back out of their circle. As she crossed into the Air Force side, the satisfaction ebbed and the weight of the debrief returned. Ops would add minor debris injury to the timeline, which actually helped her case. It proved how close everything was, how necessary the rapid fire had been. But it also made the breach impossible to ignore. If debris hit him, she had been close. On the way out, Vic caught her. You get your answer? Yeah. And? He's fine. She hesitated. I'm not sure Command will care. Vic shrugged one shoulder. Command cares about patterns. You showed them one. Now we make sure it's framed right. He tapped the folder in his hand. You're going to want witnesses. She looked at him. From the boats? From the boats, he said, and from the radar plane. Get everyone on paper while it's fresh. That was tomorrow's fight. Tonight, she let herself hold on to the single fact that mattered to her pilot's soul. No one died because of her trigger. If she had to take a letter for that, she would. Morning hadn't really arrived yet, just a gray dilution of the darkness over the airfield, when Alina found the Navy liaison office. Her own squadron spaces were waking up in their usual way. Coffee, light jokes, the smell of jet fuel baked into the walls. Here on the Navy side, it was quieter, more compartmented. Doors closed, voices low. L'été CMDR Vo was already in uniform blues, hair tight, a mug steaming beside her laptop. She looked up when Alina tapped the frame. Lieutenant Reyes. Ma'am, do you have a minute? Vo gestured her in. They're not going to call you in front of the commander until the package is clean, she said, as if continuing a thought. So if you need something in the package, now's the time. That's why I'm here, Alina said. She stayed standing. This was a favor, not a right. I need JTAC's statement to explicitly note that he cleared me danger close while friendlies were still loading, and that effects were immediate. Vo's brows flicked. You think they won't believe the tape? They'll believe the tape, Alina said. The tape shows I fired close. I need them to understand you needed me to. Vo considered her for a beat, thumb tapping the edge of the mug. McCrae already started his AAR. I told him to include that your run broke the vehicles. That may be enough. With respect, ma'am, I've been in debriefs where may wasn't enough. She held Vo's gaze. You said you'd back me if it was justified. I'm trying to make sure the people above you see what you saw. That won her a small, grudging smile. You fly like that and you argue like that. Yes, ma'am. Vo swiveled and keyed the intercom. Chief McCrae to liaison. Bring your report. It took him 2 minutes to appear, now in dry camis, hair still not quite tamed. He looked more awake than anyone should be after a night in cold water. Ma'am? Lieutenant Reyes would like your after-action to spell out that you cleared danger close and that you consider the fire necessary, Vo said. Can you do that without stepping on classification? Yeah, McCrae said easily. I was going to write it that way anyway. He turned to Alina. You did what? I asked you to do, ma'am. If anyone's got a problem with it, they can talk to the guy who said cleared hot. That's me. You know that puts you in the line too, Alina said. Command might ask why you let an aircraft fire that close. He shrugged. Because I didn't want to get shot on a beach. Easy answer. It was so simple, so unstaff-like, that Alina almost laughed. Instead, she said, Can you include the truck movement? That they were still advancing after the show of force? Yep, he said. I'll write. Vehicles did not respond to non-kinetic deterrence. Live fire required to prevent interference with exfil. That good? It's perfect, she said. Because that was exactly the language an Air Force colonel wanted to read. Vo cut in. Also note the minor injury from debris. You want that in? McCrae asked. Yes, Vo said. We don't omit wounds. We explain them. He nodded. Then I'll explain it. When he left, Alina stayed. Ma'am, there's another piece, she said. AWACS heard the whole exchange. If they file that the JTAC cleared, plus you've got McCrae's AAR, that's 2 external corroborations to my gun tape. You're building a wall, Vo said, amused. Smart. Trying to keep it about the circumstances, not about a lieutenant got overexcited. Vo sobered at that. You have pilots in your squadron saying that? A couple think I should have gone to tanker, Alina said. A couple think I got lucky. My flight lead is diplomatic. Vo's mouth flattened. They weren't looking at a truck driving at your operator. I know. Vo took a sip of coffee, then nodded. All right. I'll send a note to Overwatch requesting they attach transcript of the JTAX clearance to the incident file. You draft your own 781 and narrative today. Keep it factual, no dramatics. Yes, ma'am. And Reyes? Vo added as she turned to go. Ma'am? You're doing the right thing getting this down while it's fresh. In 2 weeks, people will only remember the ROE line. They'll forget the sea state, the delay, the number of vehicles. Make them remember. I will. Outside, the corridor was cold. She crossed back to the Air Force side, where Captain Vic was leaning over a desk with Madge. Harlan. They both looked up. Well? Vic asked. SEAL JTAC is putting it in writing, Alina said. Vo's getting AWACS transcript attached. Harlan nodded slowly. That helps. A lot. It should, she said. I don't want this to look like I went cowboy. No, Harlan said. You went Cass. He handed her a thin folder. Here. Draft your narrative. Start with the earlier-than-expected patrol movement and the dive delay. Tie every one of your decisions back to those 2 facts. She flicked through it. Timestamps, maps, a still frame from her gun tape. And the debris injury? Put it in, Harlan said. You omit it. It looks like you're hiding it. You put it in, it shows how close it was and why the danger close was justified. She met his eyes. So we're all telling the same story. Exactly, he said. A messy situation handled with acceptable risk. Acceptable. That was as good as it got. As she sat down at a corner desk and began to type, mission objective, weather, unanticipated patrol acceleration, SEAL dive delay, JTAX clearance, controlled gun employment, she felt something in her ease. Not because she thought she was in the clear. Command could still decide to make an example of her. But because the people who had been in the dark and cold with her were putting their names next to hers. It wasn't glory. It was something better in its small, soldierly way. Other professionals saying, "We saw what you saw. We asked you to do it." They called her in just after lunch, when the day had gone flat and the hangar doors were open to a pale strip of sky. The summons wasn't dramatic. A knock on the ready room door, a sergeant saying, "Ma'am, they're ready for you." But everyone in the room knew what they meant. Conversation dimmed as she stood. "Good luck," Vic murmured, not quite under his breath. "Thanks, sir." The conference room this time was smaller, more Air Force than joint. Squadron crest on the wall, coffee maker in the corner. Lieutenant Colden Farley, their detachment commander, sat at the head of the table, posture straight, reading from a slim folder. Majed and Harlan was there too, and on the screen at the end of the table, a remote face, a colonel from the higher headquarters. Connection slightly lagged. "Lieutenant Reyes," Farley said, looking up. "Have a seat." She sat, hands folded on her knee to keep them still. Her flight suit suddenly felt too warm. "We've reviewed the TAC video, the AWACS transcript, the JTAC after action, and the Navy liaison statement," Farley said. His voice was even, practiced. "We understand the operational context. SEAL element delayed in surf. Multiple armed vehicles arriving earlier than planned. Weather compressing your options." That was good. Context first. The colonel on the screen added, "We also note that JTAC, call sign Harbor, cleared you danger close with friendlies not yet fully embarked. Yes, sir, Alina said. He did. Farley glanced at her. Your actions resulted in the enemy vehicles breaking contact and allowed the exfil to proceed. The Navy commander has emphasized that without your fires, her team would likely have taken effective fire on the beach. Alina felt that land in her chest. That part mattered. However, Farley went on, and of course there was a however, you did fire within a published 150-meter no-fire bubble that had been briefed to you less than 2 hours prior. You also reported the SEAL delay in softer terms than you should have, which reduced higher headquarters' ability to reassess ROE in time. She opened her mouth, then shut it. They already knew why she'd done it. She had said it in the debrief. I didn't want the op pulled with them in the water. Saying it again wouldn't change the part that was written in ink. She had sanded off the delay. The colonel on the screen folded his hands. This creates a tension for us, Lieutenant. We do not want to discourage initiative in the defense of U.S. personnel. We also cannot have lieutenants deciding, alone, which parts of ROE are optional. I understand, sir, she said. And she did. In their chairs, without the roar of the GAU in their bones, it was a clean problem. You owned your decisions in the debrief, Farley said. You did not attempt to blame sensors or weather or misidentification. You tied your employment to the JTAX clearance. These are mitigating factors. He slid a paper toward her. Accordingly, we are issuing you a letter of counseling for ROE deviation and incomplete reporting of ground force delay. This will go in your local file. It is not a career-ending action. Letter of counseling. Not reprimand, not grounding. It stung anyway. A line on paper that would outlive this deployment. Sir, she said carefully, will this affect my flight status? No, Farley said, and his answer was immediate, solid. You remain qualified and current. I expect you to fly. I also expect next time that you pass delays exactly as given, and that you push for ROE refinement instead of assuming the risk alone. Yes, sir. The colonel on the screen added, For what it's worth, Lieutenant. The video also shows disciplined fire and immediate effect. That matters. If this had gone the other way, if you'd hit a boat, we'd be having a very different conversation. I know, sir. Good. Then we're done. The screen blinked. The colonel was gone. Harlan lingered, but Farley waited until the door closed behind the admin sergeant. Then he relaxed, just a fraction. You did good work out there, he said, less formal. I don't want this to bury the fact that you kept people alive. Thank you, sir, she said, but it came out thin. He must have heard it. Listen, this letter is as light as I could make it while still reminding you the rules are written in blood. He tapped the folder. You bent them to keep anyone else's blood off the beach. I can respect that, but I have to mark it, or I tell every other pilot they can do what they feel in the moment. I get it, she said. And she did. This was about everyone else as much as it was about her. Farley's gaze softened. What I don't want is for you to fly scared now. You are a good KS pilot. You saw the whole board. You made the hard choice. Don't let a piece of paper make you lazy next time. She blinked. I won't, sir. Good. Go sign it with Harlan. Then go study fuel planning, he said, almost wry. That tanker window's going to come up in the next op too. Outside, the corridor was the same. People walked past, joked about maintenance gripes, checked phones. No one stared, no one pointed. To most of them, she was still just the lieutenant who'd flown last night. She stopped by a window, letter in hand. It felt heavier than it should for something so thin. It was both a reprimand and, in a way, a quiet acknowledgement. We saw what you did, and we're going to let you keep doing it. But with this scar to remind you. In the hangar, the hog sat where the crew had parked it, salt still crusted in seams. She found herself smiling at it despite everything. The jet hadn't judged her. The men on the boats hadn't. The people in the room had to. She folded the letter once, careful, and slipped it into her folder. There was still flying to do. The next sortie wasn't dramatic. No divers in black water, no convoys rolling out of nowhere, just an armed overwatch over a training area inland, where a small joint team was running a dry raid and wanted eyes in case the local fishing traffic got too curious. On the schedule board, her name was written like nothing had happened. First Lieutenant Reyes, A-10C, 1 Pulse 30. No asterisk, no whispered caveat. Still, when she walked across the ramp in the morning light, she felt the letter in her folder like a second set of wings, lighter than a reprimand, heavier than air. Morales was at the jet again, squinting against the wind. "Back at it, LT," he said. "Back at it," she agreed. Strapping in felt normal. The checklist felt normal. What didn't feel normal was the small, deliberate pause she gave herself before engine start. Not to run the whole mission in her head this time, but to make a compact. Fly clean, think wide. Don't apologize for doing your job. The climb out was smooth, sky a washed-out blue instead of the steel lid she'd fought over the sea. At 8,000 feet, she could see the coastline off to the east, just a gray line now, with no heat blooms crawling toward it. "Overwatch Ember," she called, using the same call sign as that night, because that was still hers. "On station, fuel good, ready for tasking." "Ember, Overwatch, your primary eyes. We've got ground element Atlantic in the box, routine movement only. ROE is standard. No fires without PID and clearance." "Copy standard." She settled into her racetrack, pawed down on the training area. Trucks, tents, a couple of role players moving around. It was tidy, boring even, the kind of sortie junior pilots built their hours on. A week ago, she'd have looked forward to something more kinetic. Now she found the quiet, clarifying. About 20 minutes in, Atlantic called up. "Ember, Atlantic. We've got a pickup on the road south, approaching our outer marker. Probably civilian, but eyes would be nice." Here it was. Not a crisis, just a small test. She slewed the pod. A pickup, tan, 2 people in the cab, bed empty, speed reasonable. Not the aggressive, nose-down sprint of a patrol truck trying to make a beach. "Atlantic Ember, tally pickup, no visible weapons, looks like local." "Roger, we'll hold inside." She could have left it at that. Instead, she added, "Calm, professional. If they close past your marker, I can do a show of presence to keep it honest." Because that was the lesson she'd dragged off that cold beach. Start with the thing that doesn't make anyone explain gun footage. Shape the fight early so you don't have to break rules later. "Copy, Ember. We'll call if they don't turn." They did turn, right at the marker, dust kicking. Maybe they'd just been curious. Maybe they saw the hog overhead and decided today wasn't the day. Either way, no rounds, no sand fountains, no seal bleeding on a boat. "Nice and easy," Overwatch said. She could hear the approval, not patronizing, just pleased a young pilot was keeping it neat. She smiled to herself. "Figured we'd try the low-drama version today." "Every once in a while we like that," the controller said. She flew out the rest of the sortie without incident. Fuel management was textbook this time. She hit tanker when told, plugged, came back, and her SA never collapsed because nothing was collapsing on the ground. It was almost absurd how smooth it was compared to the night on the coast. But somewhere over that quiet patch of training area, she realized something had shifted. On the beach, she'd fired because there had been no good options, only fast ones. Up here, with plenty of altitude and time, she wasn't afraid she'd reach for the gun too quickly. The letter hadn't made her timid. It had made her deliberate. On RTB, approach vectored her over the water. The North Sea lay calm, gray-green, the same body that had been black and hostile days before. She looked down at it through the canopy, thinking of two small boats, of trucks braking in surprise, of a JTAC's voice saying, "Cleared hot." Back on the ramp, shutting down, she sat for a second in the quiet cockpit. She thought about the colonel on the screen telling her they couldn't have lieutenants picking which ROE to follow. She thought about McCrae saying he didn't want to get shot on a beach. And she thought about herself, thumb over master arm, choosing. It wasn't that she'd became fearless. It was that she'd proved, to them, to herself, that she could bear the mess that followed a real choice. She opened the canopy. Wind rushed in, clean and cold. Down on the tarmac, crew waved, same as always. She climbed out, boots on ladder, and for the first time since the night spray hammered her canopy, she didn't feel like she was waiting for a verdict. She already had one. She was still flying.